Grandma and Grandpa shouldn't come to the housewarming because you are of a different status than us. We were dumbfounded and speechless at Emily's lofty declaration, looking down on us. Even though Kevin wasn't there, Emily had no qualms about making such a statement, which finally pushed me over the edge. I had kept quiet for Kevin's sake, but I could no longer tolerate such behavior. Michael seemed to feel the same way, as we exchanged glances and nodded before saying to Emily, "Understood." Emily smiled with satisfaction and returned to Kevin. "My name is Alice. I am 73 years old. My husband Michael and I have a son named Kevin." Kevin has always been quiet and not very assertive, but after he graduated from high school and entered college, he began to express himself more. Kevin graduated from college and found a job. A while after that, he came home and introduced us to someone he was dating with the intention of marrying. The person Kevin brought home was a quiet woman. She was nervous and didn't speak much during the introduction, but when it came to discussing marriage with Kevin, her serious gaze convinced Michael and me to give our blessing. Seeing Kevin and his wife at their wedding made me cry tears of joy. 3 years after their marriage, Kevin and his wife were returning home for the first time during New Year's, and I was excited. Right after their marriage, I had thought they would prefer to spend time alone, so I suggested they relax instead of coming home, and they did. With this in mind, I was looking forward to finally spending time with Emily. When Kevin and Emily arrived, I greeted them with a smile. Emily, initially shy, gradually relaxed and began to feel at home in the living room. She even seemed to get along well with Michael, which secretly reassured me. As it got darker, I decided to start preparing dinner, and Emily offered to help. Feeling happy about this positive development, I was thinking about what to ask her to do when I heard an unfamiliar voice. "It's freezing. This house is way too cold." There should only have been Emily and me in the kitchen, but the low, rough voice was so different from the Emily I knew. Turning around, I saw Emily with an angry expression, rubbing her hands together. When our eyes met, she didn't bother to hide her displeasure and spoke in that same harsh tone. "I hate old houses like this. I didn't want to come, but Kevin insisted. And now it's so cold I can't stand it." I was stunned, unable to move, my mouth open in shock at Emily's words. Just moments ago, she had been cheerful, and now she was openly venting her anger at me. Still in a daze, Emily looked at me with disdain and said, "You look like you've seen a ghost. It's just an act to get married, you know? Now that we're married, I'm tired of pretending. So hurry up with the dinner, I'm starving." Emily, tired of my stunned reaction, pointed at the stove with her chin and barked orders. I must have been very shaken, as I hurriedly followed her instructions. Once I started moving, Emily just stood there, giving orders without lifting a finger. She kept criticizing me, saying I should do things more efficiently but always contradicting herself, making things more difficult. By the time the preparation was finished and all that was left was to serve the food, Emily finally started moving, acting busy. When Michael and Kevin praised her, she blushed with false modesty. It was then that I realized this was Emily's true nature. About 10 years later, Kevin and his wife had another opportunity to visit us. After that incident, Emily's true nature surfaced several times, but it seemed only in my presence. She never showed this side in front of Michael or Kevin. I thought it might be a mistake and kept quiet about it to Michael and Kevin, but as it happened every time they visited, I realized it was not a mistake. When I heard that Kevin and Emily were coming home again, I felt a bit down. I decided to avoid being alone with Emily as much as possible. Just then, the doorbell rang. I sighed briefly and opened the door to find Kevin standing there alone. Expecting both of them, I was surprised not to see Emily and instinctively looked around for her. Noticing this, Kevin said apologetically, "Sorry, Mom. Emily had some urgent work and will join us later. She said we could go ahead with the grave visit without her." Relieved that Emily wouldn't be here until her work was done, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Thinking I could avoid seeing that side of Emily for a while brightened my mood. After inviting Kevin in, Michael, who was in the living room, also noticed Emily's absence and asked about it. Preparing tea, I let out a big sigh unconsciously. We decided to relax for the day and visit the grave the next day. When Kevin informed Emily of the change, she replied, "Understood. But my work isn't finished, so I might not make it. Please apologize to your parents for me. Michael laughed it off, saying it couldn't be helped, but I felt Emily just didn't want to visit the grave. However, since I couldn't say that, I just said, "Don't worry," and spent the day without any issues. The next day, after we had visited the grave and were relaxing at home, Emily contacted us. "My work is finally done, so I'll head over tonight." Michael and Kevin seemed a bit disappointed by the timing, but my sense of discomfort only grew. That evening, as we were about to have dinner, Emily arrived. She appeared a bit sweaty and out of breath, as if to show she had hurried. I frowned involuntarily. But Michael and Kevin welcomed her enthusiastically, so I said nothing. Emily was told to take a shower while I prepared dinner, and she did so, looking apologetic. When she came out and saw the food on the table, she muttered under her breath, "Somen noodles? Because it's right after all that heat at the grave? I'm so tired of this." Just when I managed to avoid the grave visit. This is all I get to eat. Watching Emily head to the living room while tying her hair, I felt a surge of anger. But seeing her happily chatting with Michael, I couldn't find the words to confront her and kept silent. About 10 years later, Kevin and his wife decided to move from their apartment to a house. After consulting with Emily, they asked us for a little financial help for the down payment. Of course, wanting to help Kevin, we agreed and transferred the needed amount. Once the house was built, Kevin informed us, and he planned to have a housewarming party with both sets of parents. I hadn't seen Emily's parents since the wedding, so I was eager to meet them again and agreed to attend. Kevin was thrilled and quickly shared the news with Emily. Thus, we were set to attend the housewarming party next month. A few days later, Emily showed up at our house unexpectedly. Surprised by her unannounced visit, I opened the door without realizing it was her. "Yes, who is it?" Looking up, I saw Emily with a sullen expression, and I widened my eyes in surprise. "Excuse me." After quickly checking the shoes at the entrance, Emily pushed past me into the house. Maintaining her arrogant attitude, she entered the living room, likely having confirmed that Michael's shoes weren't there. Indeed, Michael was out on his daily walk and wouldn't be back for a while. Taking advantage of this, Emily barged into our house. Feeling tricked, I followed her into the living room, where she waited without sitting on the sofa. As soon as I entered, before I could close the door, Emily glared at me and said, "Are you planning to come to the housewarming party? You're not welcome, so please don't come." "What are you talking about?" Seizing the opportunity of Michael's absence, Emily crossed her arms and spoke in a high-handed manner. "You're going to tattle on me to my parents, aren't you?" With her eyes full of contempt, it was clear that Emily didn't want her parents to know about her behavior. As expected, she had timed her visit when Kevin was at work and she was off. She must have also known about Michael's daily walks from their conversations during previous visits and had planned accordingly. What a cunning daughter-in-law. "I didn't intend to, but if that's what you think, maybe I should," I said smoothly. Emily frowned, clearly annoyed. "You've got to be kidding me. I married Kevin because he's good-looking and makes decent money. I don't want to deal with annoying relatives." Hearing Emily reveal her true reasons for marrying Kevin left me stunned, and her expression froze. As I wondered about Emily's sudden change in demeanor, I heard the living room door open behind me. Turning around, I saw Michael, his eyes wide as he looked at Emily. Realizing he had overheard the conversation, Emily clicked her tongue but decided to double down. "Anyway, you guys are beneath me, so don't come to the housewarming party," she declared, looking down on us. We were too shocked to respond to Emily's arrogant declaration. Despite Kevin's absence, Emily felt no qualms about saying such things, and my patience finally snapped. I had kept quiet for Kevin's sake, but this was too much to overlook. Michael seemed to feel the same way, as we exchanged glances and nodded before saying to Emily, "Understood." Hearing this, Emily smiled with satisfaction and went back to Kevin. Left alone, we slumped onto the sofa, exhausted. On the day of the housewarming party, we didn't go to Kevin and Emily's house. We hadn't told Kevin about Emily's behavior. Naturally, Kevin would expect us to come. By now, Kevin and Emily might be panicking. I thought about this while enjoying coffee with Michael at a cafe. Just then, Michael's phone rang. He stepped outside to take the call. After quickly settling the bill, I followed him out. Once in the car, Michael put the call on speaker so I could hear Kevin's voice. "Dad, something strange is going on. All of our relatives suddenly had plans, and you and Mom haven't arrived. Even Emily's relatives are canceling. What's happening?" Feeling sorry for Kevin but determined to teach Emily a lesson, we decided to play along. "Who knows what's going on? What does Emily say?" Michael said nonchalantly. His natural acting surprised me, and I widened my eyes. Noticing my reaction, Michael winked and signaled me to keep it a secret. I almost laughed but quickly covered my mouth. "Emily's as confused as I am." "Oh, I have another call. I'll call back. Take care." Kevin didn't suspect us at all, which made me feel a bit guilty, but I rationalized it as necessary to deal with Emily. Then my phone rang. It was a relative who was supposed to attend the housewarming. Feeling a bit apologetic, I chatted with them for a while. Since they loved long conversations, we ended up talking for quite a while when Michael's phone rang again. It was Kevin. Michael put it on speaker again and answered. "Dad? I just heard from Emily's mother. What's going on? If you can come, please do so immediately." Hearing Kevin's desperate voice, I felt my heart ache and looked at Michael. Michael felt the same, his brow furrowed as he looked at me. I nodded, and Michael reassured Kevin. "All right, we'll be there soon. Calm down." Kevin, relieved, agreed and hung up. We were at a cafe near Kevin's new home, so we quickly drove over. When we rang the doorbell, Kevin rushed out to greet us. Behind him stood Emily, glaring at us furiously. Kevin invited us in and led us to the living room sofa. Once we were seated, Kevin began to ask questions. "I didn't expect you to get here so quickly. Where were you? What's going on? Our relatives are angry, and Emily's relatives are apologizing. I'm completely confused." "Calm down, Kevin. First of all, congratulations on your new house. I'll explain everything now." After calming Kevin, I turned to Emily, who was silently standing by. "You know why it's just the three of us here, don't you, Emily? What are you talking about?" With a sigh, I began to speak to Emily, who was still feigning ignorance. "You didn't want me to come, but given the situation, your worries are over now." "Didn't want you to come? What do you mean by that?" Seeing Kevin's confusion, I smiled and continued. "Everyone, both your relatives and ours, already knows everything. Unfortunately, your plan has failed. You've already been scolded by your relatives, right? Mind your own business." A low growl came from Emily. It was undoubtedly Emily's voice, and both Michael and Kevin, hearing it for the first time, were stunned. Ignoring that, I continued, staring directly at Emily. "Judging by Kevin's reaction, you were pretending to be someone you're not since you started dating him. Now that your true colors have been revealed, why don't you give up? I didn't invite you." "What?" Unlike before, Emily muttered in a barely audible voice, causing Kevin to lean closer and ask again. Suddenly, Emily looked up and started screaming. "I didn't invite you. I told you not to come. Why did you come? And spreading lies to the whole family to ruin me. Does that make you happy?" Kevin recoiled in shock at her outburst. Sighing at Emily's continued self-victimization, I replied. "Phones are convenient, aren't they, Emily?" With that, I nodded at Michael. Michael took out his phone, operated it, and glanced at Kevin. "I just wanted to marry Kevin because he's good-looking and makes decent money. I don't want to deal with annoying relatives. Anyway, you old people are beneath me, so you shouldn't come to the housewarming party." Emily's voice from that day played from Michael's phone. Emily turned pale and looked at Kevin. As the recording ended, Kevin turned to Emily, his mouth gaping open. Emily shook her head in denial, but after the recording, what excuse could she possibly make? I came home early because of the bad weather and overheard the conversation. I couldn't help but record it. I'm glad it was useful. Kevin looked at me to confirm Michael's words. I nodded firmly. I couldn't believe it at first either, Kevin. But it's Emily's true feelings recorded here, and she said the last part in my presence. It's too late to make excuses now. Michael's eyes, fixed on Emily, showed anger. Realizing she had been deceiving Kevin since their relationship began, how could he not be angry? Seeing Michael's eyes, Emily slumped her shoulders and stopped resisting. With this confirmation, Kevin abruptly stood up and left the house. We couldn't stop him, and Michael quickly followed but returned shortly. Apparently, Kevin had driven off somewhere. Without his phone, we couldn't contact him. Emily, left behind, was pale and trembling slightly. Time passed without a solution, and eventually, Kevin returned. He was holding something, which he slammed in front of Emily and spoke quietly. "Sign the divorce papers and leave." "What?" Emily looked up at Kevin in shock. Kevin repeated himself, took a pen from the holder, and started signing his section. After finishing, he handed the pen to Emily and pointed at the divorce papers. "Come on, sign and get out." Intimidated, Emily filled in her section while shaking. When she finished writing, she looked at Kevin, but he didn't even make eye contact with her as he checked for any missing information. Seeing there were no mistakes, he forcibly stood her up and dragged her to the front door. Ignoring her pleas, he threw her bag outside and shut the door forcefully. "It's already late, so I'll submit this tomorrow. You are never to cross this threshold again." With that, he slammed the door shut and locked it. We could hear Emily's desperate pleas from outside. But Kevin ignored her and bowed to us. "I'm sorry for causing you all this trouble," not realizing what she was. As Kevin bowed deeply, we couldn't say anything, just hugged him tightly. Eventually, Emily's voice faded away. We decided to stay at Kevin's new house that night. The next morning, Kevin submitted the divorce papers first thing, finalizing the divorce with Emily. Worried about Kevin's state, we decided to stay another night and talked about everything that had happened. As we recounted past events, Kevin listened with clenched fists. Michael, who also didn't know these details, placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder as I spoke. We then explained the recent events. After Emily had told us not to come and left, I found out that Michael had recorded her outburst. We decided to talk to Emily's parents about it. At first, they were in disbelief, but after hearing the recording, they apologized profusely. Angered by their daughter's behavior, Emily's parents decided to inform the relatives who were planning to come to the housewarming party. After hanging up the phone, we discussed it and decided to talk to our relatives. Our relatives were equally furious and said they wouldn't go either. That's how the current situation came to be. Hearing everything, Kevin slumped his shoulders again. Though we were worried, there was nothing more we could do, so we stayed another night. The next day, Kevin came to the living room looking more at ease and shared what had happened. Apparently, he had contacted his former in-laws, and Emily was now back at her parents' house but had been disowned and kicked out. They planned to bring compensation money and hold Emily responsible for the debt as their former daughter-in-law. Kevin seemed somewhat appeased, though not fully satisfied, and was calmer than expected. After returning home, we immediately started packing up. We decided to sell our old house, which had grown quite aged. The new house was being remodeled to accommodate us for cohabitation. Since Kevin worked during the day, the renovations would take place then. Even though it was costly to renovate a newly built house, we decided to help financially since we had some extra money. While waiting for the renovations to finish, we are joyfully packing up our old house.